Story 1. In 1996, I had just dropped out of university and was moving home to my parents' place. My tail was firmly between my legs. I had almost no money and no job prospects. Basically, I was in a tough spot. I had an old Jeep Comanche with all my belongings in the back and 200 miles to go. I borrowed $20 from a friend for gas and started the trip. I got to a point that was 30 miles from home and was on empty. I pulled into a gas station and sort of cried for a minute in my truck. I needed $5 for gas to make it the rest of the way and had nothing. There was no way I could call my dad and ask for help. He was already so disappointed. After a minute, I started searching around my truck for change. Anything. I opened the glove box and found these paper loyalty bucks for a gas station that I never used. It turned out to be the exact gas station where I had stopped, for $1.70 worth of bucks. I found another $2 in change, put $6 in the gas tank, and bought a soda. I made it home. Fast forward 20 years. I had sorted my life out and became a lawyer. That gas station hired me as their outside counsel, and I got to tell the story to the president of the company. Story 2. I was on my way back to the United States for my sophomore year of college and was at an airport in Scotland for a connecting flight. While waiting, I started talking with a fellow traveler, and we got along perfectly, discussing our love of traveling. Eventually, we had to part ways to reach our respective gates, but we didn't exchange names. When I started dating my now husband, during my first visit to his home, I saw a photo of him and his late wife in his living room. To my surprise, his late wife was the exact woman I had been talking to at the airport in Scotland years earlier. They must have both been at the airport at the same time, but I didn't see him. Story 3. Matched with someone on a dating app, went on one date and didn't click. A year later, I started a job, and guess who is doing my onboarding? Story 4. I used to perform as a magician fairly regularly. One night, I was performing at a small bar. I opened my set with some coin tricks and mind reading, and then picked a volunteer for a card trick. I had a young woman pick a card and warned her not to let me see it. However, she gasped and said, "It's the 7 of clubs." Being told the name of the card made the end of the trick much less impressive. Before I could ask her to pick again, she pulled down her pants and revealed a tattoo. It turns out she had gotten the 7 of clubs tattooed on her a few days ago, and this was the first day without the bandages. Sadly, she was too shocked at my prediction to speak, and I never learned the story behind the tattoo. Story 5. I have to say the reason for my username is the weirdest and craziest thing I have ever experienced. My girlfriend at the time and I went camping, and being the free spirits we were, we dropped some acid as the sun was going down and chilled in the tent listening to music. About an hour or two in, we started seeing flashes of light. At first, we figured it was someone else with a flashlight, but then we heard a distant ominous boom. I looked out the tent door. To my left was a perfect starry night, and to my right was a giant black doom cloud with a lot of lightning coming from it. So began the scramble of getting everything out of the tent and into the car. I remember being so high that the stuff I picked up seemed to melt into my arms. We left the tent because we couldn't figure out how to take it down and took shelter in the car ourselves. The storm lasted all night long, with many strikes quite close by. A nearby radio tower was hit repeatedly through the night. At one point, I suddenly felt tingly all over, looked over at my girlfriend, and we saw that our hair was standing on end. We had maybe a half second of wide-eyed realization before kaboom. It was like a flashbang went off beside me. The bolt struck so close that had the passenger window been down, I could have reached out and grabbed it. It also wasn't a normal strike. It left a huge streak of ionized air where the bolt had been, and I've only ever seen that in videos of unusually powerful strikes. At the time, I described it as Zeus and his Greek god friends were all chilling when they saw a couple of puny humans tripping absolute balls in a giant lightning storm, and said, "Hey guys, want to see something really funny?" And thus, You Puny Humans was born. Story 6. My cat disappeared for 2 days. I found her sitting in my closet with a completely different collar, one I would never buy. No one in the neighborhood recognized it, and my cat is strictly an indoor-only cat. I still have no explanation. Story 7. This is a lighthearted but funny story. Once, I saw officers chasing a man. I let the man run right by me, and they asked, "Why didn't you stop him?" I gestured and said, "He's over there." The man tripped over his own feet, and I improvised, "There you go." The next week, I ran into one of the officers, and he asked, almost pleadingly, "How did you do that? Can you show me how?" The more I told him the truth, the more it seemed like I was hiding something. I was close to creating some elaborate lie about being part of a program for special individuals, and that he was compromising my cover. That poor officer really wanted the whole thing to be real so badly. It felt like telling a child that Santa wasn't real. Story 8. My grandfather was arrested in 1969 for stalking and threatening President Nixon. This incident greatly contributed to Nixon's paranoia. Fast forward to around 1993 or 1994, and I had the chance to meet him at his last public appearance, backstage at a high school play in which his granddaughter was performing. I didn't have the opportunity to apologize for my grandfather's alcohol-fueled behavior. Story 9. I was on the subway, deeply hungover, heading to work. About a third of the way through the ride, I felt that I was being watched. I looked around and realized that a child, about 5 or 6 years old, was staring at me. I stared back. She then pulled a raw hot dog out of her back pocket and began to peel and eat it like string cheese. We never broke eye contact. She ate the whole thing that way. My stop arrived, and I exited the train. It was an unsettling experience, though I can't quite articulate why. Story 10. I worked for Blockbuster many years ago. I had just moved to a new city to manage a busy store. I was a smoker back then and had a spot by the side of the building, out of view, where I could smoke during my break, but within sight of a window so my employees could flag me down if there was a problem. One evening, while the sun was still up, I stepped out and noticed a car parked directly in front of my smoking spot. There were 2 men inside who gave me a paranoid look, but I didn't think much of it. I pulled out my cigarette, lit it, and got exactly one drag before an unmarked white van whipped around the corner of the building and came to a screeching halt behind the car. The door slid open and out came the SWAT team. I'm not kidding. It was the actual SWAT team. Full gear, semi-automatic weapons drawn, surrounding the car and shouting in Spanish for the occupants to exit the vehicle. I was completely frozen in that moment. I couldn't move or think. I was just stunned by what I was witnessing. A plainclothes officer in a bulletproof vest approached me and gently said, "You might want to go back inside," all while keeping his firearm trained on those guys. I dropped my cigarette and went back inside. A few weeks later, I learned it was one of the largest heroin busts in Raleigh's history. They decided to make the deal in one of the busiest parking lots on the busiest road in the entire city. So, yes, that was a truly strange and frightening experience, something I'll never forget. Story 11. I have a kind of ghost story. I have been very skeptical about all religions and supernatural phenomena my whole life and think there is an explanation for everything. One night, I was going to bed, just about to lie down and turn off the lights when I spotted one of my cats sitting on the ground in front of my bed, next to a 3-drawer cabinet where I kept my daily clothes. I went to give her a scratch behind the ears to say goodnight when the bottom drawer suddenly opened. I had already taken out my contact lenses, but there was no way the cat could have opened the drawer, as she was too far away, and it would be physically impossible for a cat to open a drawer with a knob. Flabbergasted at what I had just witnessed, I put on some glasses and turned on more light. The cat was still sitting in front of the now open drawer, which was full of socks. While I was still wondering what had happened, one pair of socks started to wiggle. Just one pair. At this point, I began to question reality. I inspected the socks. There was nothing unusual about them. The drawer was full of socks, and I didn't see anything else. The cabinet was against the wall, and the cat was too far away. Only when I removed the entire drawer did I discover that the other cat had crawled through a small cutout at the back, pushing it open and playing with the pair of socks through a small slit at the back of the drawer and the drawer above it. If I had panicked and hadn't inspected the whole situation, I'm certain this would have been one of those potential ghost stories or moments that make you question reality. Story 12. I was on a trip in Germany with my family to see my uncle in the Air Force get married. as that's where he was stationed. My family was walking around a historical tourist attraction. I think it was the Porta Nigra. We were strolling when suddenly, a very touristy Asian man, complete with a camera, fanny pack, sun hat, and sunglasses, ran up behind me, put his arm around me, smiled for a picture, and then ran off. All of this happened in about 2 seconds. It was both funny and confusing. My theory is that he wanted a picture with a real German kid, and since I look quite German, he chose to take one with me. I still laugh at that memory from time to time. I sincerely hope that picture somehow finds its way to me. Story 13. I once found a pair of sunglasses in a tree during a walk. As I reached to grab them, a squirrel swooped down, snatched them out of my hand, and ran off. I stood there watching the squirrel strut around like it was the new fashion icon of the park. Story 14. I was on a train a few years ago, listening to music. As a song ended, I checked the time. I looked again 3 or 4 minutes later when the song finished, and 10 minutes had passed. The song was only 3 or 4 minutes long, but somehow I lost 6 minutes of my life. It was strange. Story 15. Our middle school field trip was delayed because a cow was giving birth in the middle of the road. Story 16. This happened to my parents. They were in separate vehicles coming home from town, a 1.5-hour drive from home. They were talking on the very high-frequency radio about mundane things when my mom noticed that my dad was ahead of her and not behind her anymore. My dad never passed her, and he had no idea how he ended up in front of her. The weirdest part? An hour had passed, and neither of them knew how. It was as if my dad had teleported and time had jumped ahead in just a few short minutes. Story 17. I used to run my own mobile DJ business. One day, I was transporting equipment into a venue when one of the fluorescent light tubes in the ceiling exploded just as I walked under it. The plastic panel flew off and hit me in the head. I was okay, but it was a jarring experience. Story 18. I was helping a friend install a rearview camera on his car. I plugged in the cable connections for the camera before installation to ensure it worked. I installed the camera and pulled the cable through the car, only to discover that the cable connection no longer fit. It was no longer metal. It had suddenly become a light brown plastic and was too large to plug in. Nothing seemed broken. Everything appeared fine. It was just that all the metal had changed to plastic. I still can't figure out what happened. My friend was there, just as shocked as I was. I'm a mechanic by trade, and this definitely wasn't my first installation. Story 19. I woke up at 3 a.m. to a random cat that had let itself in through my window and was wandering around my bedroom. It was a cool night. I found out his name was Nemo. Story 20. My father passed under strange circumstances. Bills neatly arranged on the kitchen table, all his identification documents, and new clothes still in their bags. New, unused suitcases were also present. 10 years later, I came across seasons of unsolved mysteries from the 1980s. In one particular episode, a man disappears, and the scene described in the episode is exactly how my father left his apartment when he died. It was then that I realized that I never actually saw my father after he passed. His sister found him and initiated the process for his cremation. To this day, I don't know what to make of this. I get chills every time I think back on that episode. Story 21. Around 1992, I was working as a waitress in a restaurant where cab drivers could come before and after their shifts. They typically just had coffee. The price for coffee and refills was $1.60, and most of the drivers would leave $2, giving me a small tip. One day, a new guy came in, and I had a creepy feeling about him right from the start. I told my coworkers how he felt strange. Even though he didn't do or say anything unusual or behave inappropriately, he didn't tip. I remember saying to them that I must have sensed he wouldn't tip. The next day, we found out he had been murdered. The story was that he was involved in some bad things, but I don't recall the details. I guess I had some intuition that day. I also remember feeling a sense of wishing something bad upon him because he didn't tip. Story 22. This is unusual for me, but it is also well-deserved karma. When I was a teenager, I did not treat girls properly. I did not take relationships as seriously as I should have. For some unknown reason, I suddenly started getting attention from many attractive girls, and regrettably, I cheated on a few girlfriends. I deeply regret this behavior, and it has never happened again as an adult. I have apologized to all the girls involved for what that is worth during my final year of high school and at the very start of my first semester of university. It happened 3 times in total, twice while I was in high school and once at university. 3 girls from the same class at university became friendly with each other, going out for lunches together and helping each other with lecture notes. One day, they discussed their worst experiences with a guy, and during their explanations, they slowly realized they were all talking about the same guy. Me. I found out about it because one of the girls I was still somewhat friendly with despite what had happened came over to my dorm room to tell me and ask if I knew them because they shared the same module that semester and had become friends, all talking about the same problematic boyfriend. I turned pale as I confirmed I knew them and had dated them. I asked how they all knew each other, and she explained it was pure chance and filled me in on the rest. The odds of that happening out of a full lecture hall, especially that all 3 of them ended up in the same one, are extremely small. It was well-deserved karma on my part, no doubt about that, and it did set me straight. However, how strange is it that all 3 ended up together, a group of strangers who became friends, only to realize they were talking about the same boyfriend? Story 23. I was at my friend's sleepover. My smartwatch was at less than 10%. I didn't bring my charger, so I kept my smartwatch on a shelf in front of the living room where we all slept on blankets. I left my smartwatch in low power mode to protect myself from radiation. The next morning, after eating breakfast and playing for an hour, my mom came to pick me up. She asked if I had everything, and I realized I needed to get my watch. My watch was exactly where I had left it. I took it off the shelf. It was at 100%. But how? Are smartwatches solar-powered or something? I asked all my friends if they were pranking me or had charged my watch overnight. But why would someone take my watch, charge it, and then put it back where it was? This happened yesterday. The day before, we drove to my aunt's house because someone invited us to a puja, a Hindu worship ritual, near where she lived. We live 1 hour away, so it wasn't a big deal. When I took my smartwatch, it was at around 70%. I took my charger with me in case I found a spot to plug it in. But I kept my smartwatch in my backpack the whole time. The next day, we went to the puja. After it, we stayed at my aunt's for the rest of the day. When it was around 8, we drove back home. I took my smartwatch out of my backpack in the car, powered it on, and it was at 100%. This time, solar power could not have been the reason. My smartwatch had been in my backpack the whole time. What could have happened? Was sunlight filtering through the backpack? Am I going crazy? Anyways, this is just for context, but the first time it happened at my friend's sleepover, I had a much older version of the smartwatch. I'm not sure what series it was, but it couldn't call or text for some reason. It was black. The second time, I had a new smartwatch and it is Series 9. It is red. How did the same weird, creepy thing happen to 2 different watches? I guess I'll never know. Story 24. When your mom says you can play games, but an hour later sees you playing and gets angry. Mom, you said I could play? No, I didn't. I never said that. Story 25. I walked out of my house to ask my dad a question. He smokes, so he left the house. I didn't see him where he normally smokes in front of the house, so I turned left. I saw him walking into a house down the street. I thought it was strange that we never talked to those people and started moving toward the house. I was crossing the street as we live on a corner when I felt a strong urge to look left. The house he went into was right in front of me at that point. I saw my dad walking out of a house 100 yards away, just 15 seconds after he entered another house. I was completely sober. He was not still smoking, and I never saw him put out his cigarette. So, I figured he either teleported or went into a mirror like in a movie because everything happened so quickly that it seemed impossible without some extraordinary event occurring. Story 26. A friend and I were terrorized by devil worshippers in a trailer park in Tupelo, Mississippi, back in 1995. We were staying in a trailer for the night when a group of people, who seemed to live in that park, approached us. They appeared to be part of a cult. I'm not sure why they chose us, but they harassed us, banged on the outside of the trailer, tampered with our vehicles to prevent them from running, and followed us while chanting as we walked out of the trailer park. They even had goats. It was completely wild. Story 27. I ran into a high school friend whom I hadn't seen since graduation 3 years ago in a park in London. We are from Houston. Story 28. I lost my memory for a short time when I was 5 years old. I was playing hide and seek with my siblings in a schoolyard during summer. I was the seeker and lay on top of a tall rock, taller than me, with my eyes closed. The next moment, I found myself on the ground next to the rock, with my siblings and an adult woman by my side, saying that I had fallen from the rock. But I hadn't, and nothing hurt. How long had it been since my siblings left to hide when I started counting? If hitting my head made me forget the fall, why wasn't my head hurting? And why don't I remember the woman and my siblings coming to me? I asked my siblings about this as an adult, but they didn't remember it. Story 29. I became a person who engages in sex work. As someone who had dreams of saving crushes in high school, I thought that was the only way I could have a girlfriend. But by the age of 20, I was living a lifestyle that left me feeling empty inside. If someone had told my high school self that I would end up in this situation, I would have laughed in their face. Story 30. My mother said she was thinking of an actor that she wanted my sister to emulate. Without any additional help, I correctly guessed the name of the actor she had in mind. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.